The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg's training grounds as Sarah Chun adjusted her tactical vest for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of proving herself among the elite Special Forces candidates surrounding her. At 26, she was older than most recruits, her previous career as a software engineer seeming like a distant memory as she faced the grueling selection process. "Look what we got here," sneered Marcus Rivera, a towering former Marine whose biceps strained against his uniform. "Pentagon sending us their diversity hires now." His comment drew chuckles from several nearby candidates, their eyes scanning Sarah's slight 5'4" frame with obvious skepticism. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had heard variations of this comment throughout her military career, first in basic training, then during her stint with Army intelligence, and now here at the most challenging selection process in the military. The whispers followed her everywhere. "She doesn't belong here. Special treatment. Quota filler." Each word was a knife she had learned to deflect, channeling the pain into determination. The selection instructor, Sergeant Major Williams, emerged from the command building, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he surveyed the 37 candidates assembled before him. Williams was a legend in Special Forces circles, a man who had served in every major conflict of the past 2 decades, and whose reputation for breaking soldiers was matched only by his ability to forge the finest warriors. "Listen up, candidates," Williams barked, his voice carrying across the training ground without apparent effort. "What you're about to experience over the next 3 weeks will test every fiber of your being. Physical strength, mental fortitude, tactical thinking, and, most importantly, your ability to function as part of an elite team. 80% of you will fail. The question is not whether you think you belong here, but whether you have what it takes when everything falls apart." Sarah's mind drifted briefly to her younger brother Danny, whose photograph she carried in her breast pocket. Danny had been killed by an IED in Afghanistan while serving with the 82nd Airborne. His last letter to her had contained a simple message: "Don't let them tell you what you can't do, sis. Show them who you really are." Those words had driven her through every obstacle, every setback, every moment when quitting seemed like the logical choice. The first exercise was a 12-mile ruck march through the North Carolina wilderness, carrying 75 pounds of equipment under the scorching August sun. Sarah fell into formation, ignoring the continued comments from Rivera and his growing circle of supporters. "Bet she doesn't make it past mile 5, one whispered. "Money says she's crying by mile 3, another added. As the group began moving through dense forest trails, Sarah found her rhythm. Her legs, strengthened by years of marathon running, carried her steadily forward while several larger candidates began to struggle with the pace. Her software engineering background had taught her to think systematically, breaking down complex problems into manageable components. She approached this march the same way, one step, one breath, 1 mile at a time. By mile 8, the formation had begun to spread out significantly. Several candidates had already dropped out, medics escorting them back to base in vehicles that seemed to mock the determination of those still pressing forward. Sarah maintained her position in the middle of the pack, her breathing controlled despite the oppressive heat that had several muscular candidates gasping for air. Rivera, who had been near the front of the formation for the first half of the march, began to falter. His heavy frame, built for short bursts of power rather than endurance, became a liability as the miles accumulated. Sarah passed him at mile 9, her steady pace unchanged, her eyes focused on the trail ahead rather than the man who had questioned her presence just hours earlier. "This is impossible," gasped Thompson, a former Navy SEAL who had been expected to dominate the physical challenges. He stumbled to a halt beside a massive oak tree, his face flushed red with heat exhaustion. "Water break. I need a water break." But there were no breaks in Special Forces selection. Williams had made that clear from the beginning. Either you completed the task as prescribed, or you failed. There was no middle ground, no participation trophies, no allowances for good intentions or near misses. Sarah continued forward, her mind now entering the meditative state she had discovered during her longest training runs. Pain became background noise. Doubt transformed into fuel. The weight on her back seemed to distribute itself more evenly as her body adapted to the sustained effort. She thought about her brother Danny, about the promise she had made at his graveside, about every person who had ever told her she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough for this world. The trail wound through a particularly challenging section of terrain, forcing candidates to navigate steep inclines, rocky outcroppings, and dense undergrowth that seemed designed to snag equipment and slow progress. Sarah's smaller stature became an advantage here, allowing her to move through tight spaces that forced larger candidates to take longer routes around obstacles. At mile 11, she caught up to the lead group, a collection of 5 candidates who had maintained the front position throughout the march. They glanced at her with surprise, their earlier assumptions about her capabilities clearly being reassessed in real time. Among them was Jackson, a former Army Ranger whose reputation had preceded him to selection, and Williams, a Delta Force veteran seeking to cross-train with another elite unit. Where did she come from? Jackson muttered to his companion, glancing back at the trail they had just covered. The implications of Sarah's presence in the lead group were clear. While they had been struggling to maintain their pace, she had been steadily gaining ground from further back in the formation. The final mile tested everyone's resolve as the trail descended into a swampy lowland area where each step required pulling boots from sucking mud. The air grew thick and humid, making breathing more difficult just as legs and backs screamed for relief from the sustained effort. Several candidates who had maintained strong positions throughout the march finally succumbed to the accumulated stress, falling behind as their energy reserves depleted completely. Sarah emerged from the swamp onto the final stretch of paved road leading back to the base, her uniform soaked with sweat and mud, but her pace unchanged. She crossed the finish line 6th overall, ahead of 23 other candidates, including Rivera, who stumbled across the line nearly 30 minutes later, his face a mask of exhaustion and disbelief. As candidates collapsed on the ground around the finish area, gasping for air and reaching for water bottles, Sarah remained standing. Her breathing was heavy but controlled, her posture upright despite the ordeal she had just completed. The whispers from earlier in the day had been replaced by a grudging silence as her fellow candidates reassessed their assumptions about the quiet woman who had just outperformed many of them. Sergeant Major Williams made notes on his clipboard, his expression revealing nothing about his thoughts regarding individual performances. But several candidates noticed his gaze lingering on Sarah as she helped a struggling teammate to the medical area, her own exhaustion temporarily forgotten in favor of taking care of others. That evening in the barracks, the atmosphere had shifted perceptibly. The casual dismissal that had characterized earlier interactions with Sarah had been replaced by wary respect from some candidates and increased hostility from others. Rivera, his pride wounded by being outperformed by someone he had publicly dismissed, gathered a small group of supporters around his bunk. "It's just one exercise," he insisted, though his voice lacked the confidence it had carried that morning. "Wait until we get to the combat scenarios. Wait until real strength matters. Wait until lives depend on more than just running endurance." His words were meant to diminish Sarah's accomplishment, but they revealed his own growing uncertainty about the assumptions he had made. Sarah lay on her narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling as her body began the recovery process. Every muscle ached, her feet were blistered despite her careful preparation, and she knew this was only the beginning. The next morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities for her detractors to prove their point about her supposed inadequacy. But something had changed during those 12 miles through the North Carolina wilderness. She had proven something to herself that went beyond the opinions of others. The doubt that had whispered in her ear during quiet moments, the voice that wondered if maybe they were right about her not belonging here, had grown quieter. In its place was a steady confidence built on evidence rather than hope. As sleep finally came, Sarah's last conscious thought was of Danny's photograph in her breast pocket. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new chances to honor his memory and prove that determination could overcome doubt. The mocking laughter of her fellow candidates had been replaced by something more valuable, the knowledge that she belonged here not because someone had given her a chance, but because she had earned it one step at a time. The pre-dawn darkness cloaked Fort Bragg as candidates stumbled from their bunks at 0400 hours, their bodies still aching from the previous day's ruck march. Sarah moved efficiently through her morning routine, her military training having ingrained the importance of preparation and punctuality. Around her, The barracks buzzed with nervous energy as candidates prepared for unknown challenges ahead. Day 2 brought urban combat simulations in a mock city constructed specifically for Special Forces training. The facility, known as Little Baghdad among soldiers, featured multi-story buildings, narrow alleyways, and hidden rooms designed to replicate the complexity of modern urban warfare. Sarah studied the briefing materials carefully, noting sight lines, potential ambush points, and the intricate layout that would test tactical thinking as much as physical prowess. Today's exercise will test your ability to operate as a cohesive unit under extreme stress, announced Captain Rodriguez, the day's lead instructor. You will be divided into teams of 4 and tasked with clearing buildings, rescuing hostages, and eliminating hostile threats. Live ammunition will not be used, but simunition rounds will leave marks you'll feel for days. Failure to follow protocols will result in immediate dismissal from the program. Sarah found herself assigned to Team Delta alongside Rivera, Jackson, and a quiet former Air Force pararescueman named Mills. The tension was immediately apparent as Rivera's hostility from the previous day had crystallized into open resentment. "Great," he muttered loud enough for the others to hear, stuck with dead weight. Jackson, whose performance on the ruck march had earned him respect throughout the candidate pool, studied Sarah with careful eyes. His assessment was more measured than Rivera's, but equally skeptical. "Chun, you took point on the endurance stuff yesterday, but this is different. This requires split-second decisions under fire. You sure you're ready for this?" Mills remained silent, his pale blue eyes moving between his teammates as he calculated the dynamics at play. His pararescue background had taught him that successful missions depended more on trust and communication than individual heroics. The doubt radiating from half their team concerned him more than any tactical challenge they might face. The first building clearance exercise began at 0800 hours. Team Delta stacked up outside a 3-story structure, checking equipment and reviewing entry procedures. Sarah had positioned herself third in the stack, a tactical decision that kept her in the action while allowing more experienced urban warfare specialists to take point and rear security. "Remember," Rivera whispered harshly as they prepared to breach, "when this goes sideways, don't freeze up and get us all killed." His words were intended to undermine Sarah's confidence, but they revealed his own anxiety about the exercise ahead. The breach went smoothly initially. Jackson's experience showed as he efficiently cleared the first room, his movements precise and controlled. Mills followed, covering angles and maintaining communication with the rest of the team. Sarah entered third, immediately scanning her assigned sectors and noting potential threats that might have been missed by the first 2 operators. The simulated firefight erupted on the second floor as automated pop-up targets appeared from behind furniture, doorways, and windows. The realistic sound effects and smoke machines created an environment that tested nerves as much as tactical skills. Sarah's software engineering background proved unexpectedly valuable as she rapidly processed the complex 3-dimensional puzzle of threats, cover positions, and team movements. "Contact left," she called out, identifying a target that had emerged from behind an overturned desk. Her simunition round struck center mass before Rivera, who had been assigned that sector, even acquired the threat. The scoring system registered her hit with an electronic beep, while Rivera's delayed response earned him a simulated enemy round to the shoulder. "Lucky shot," Rivera growled, though his tone lacked conviction. The electronic scoring system showed Sarah leading the team in accuracy and target acquisition speed, metrics that were difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The second building proved more challenging, featuring a hostage rescue scenario with civilian pop-up targets mixed among hostile ones. Split-second identification became crucial as hitting a civilian target resulted in automatic mission failure for the entire team. Sarah's methodical approach served her well here, her pattern recognition skills allowing her to quickly distinguish between threats and innocence even in the stress-filled environment. "Hostage secured," Mills reported from the second floor as Sarah covered his movement from the stairwell. "2 tangos down, package is clean." The relief in his voice was evident as they successfully completed their first complex scenario without civilian casualties. But Rivera's frustration was building with each successful action by Sarah. During the debrief between exercises, he confronted her directly. "You're showing off," he accused, his voice low but intense. "This isn't some video game where you rack up points. When we're downrange for real, your fancy shooting won't matter if you can't carry your weight when someone's bleeding out." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I'm doing my job," she replied simply. "Same as everyone else here." Her calm response seemed to infuriate Rivera further, his face reddening as other candidates turned to watch the confrontation. Jackson stepped between them, his leadership instincts taking over. "We've got 3 more buildings to clear before lunch. Save the personality conflicts for after we're done getting shot at with training rounds." His intervention defused the immediate tension, but the underlying conflict remained unresolved. The afternoon brought the most challenging exercise yet, a nighttime building clearance using night vision equipment. The artificial darkness and green-tinted world of night vision goggles created additional stress as teams navigated familiar spaces that had become alien and threatening. Communication became even more critical as visual cues were limited and shadows could conceal both threats and teammates. Sarah had extensive experience with night vision technology from her Army intelligence background, but operating with a hostile teammate proved more difficult than any technical challenge. Rivera's passive-aggressive behavior escalated as he began providing incorrect information about cleared sectors and delayed his responses to her radio calls. The crisis came during the final room clearance when Rivera deliberately moved into Sarah's line of fire, forcing her to hold her shot as a pop-up target engaged their position. The simulated enemy round struck both of them before either could return effective fire, a failure that would normally result in mission termination for the entire team. "What the hell was that?" Mills demanded over the radio, his professional composure finally cracking. Chen had a clean shot, and someone walked right into her lane. Rivera's response crackled through their communications system. "Maybe if she called out her movements properly, we wouldn't have these problems. Some people aren't ready for this level of operation." But Sergeant Major Williams had been monitoring their communications throughout the exercise. His voice cut through their radio chatter with unmistakable authority. "Team Delta, report to debrief immediately." And I mean immediately. The after-action review was conducted in a small, windowless room that magnified the tension between team members. Williams reviewed the exercise footage in detail, pointing out tactical errors and successful decisions with equal precision. When he reached the final room clearance, he paused the video at the moment Rivera moved into Sarah's firing lane. "Candidate Rivera," Williams said, his tone deadly calm. "Explain your movement here." The video clearly showed Rivera's deliberate action, making any excuse impossible to maintain. Rivera's response was defensive. "I was advancing to better cover, Sergeant Major. The angle looked clear from my position." But his explanation crumbled under Williams' methodical questioning about basic tactical movements and communication protocols. "Candidate Chun," Williams continued, turning his attention to Sarah, "why didn't you take the shot?" The question was a test, and Sarah recognized it immediately. Friendly in the line of fire, Sergeant Major. Blue-on-blue engagement was the greater risk than accepting enemy fire. Her answer demonstrated understanding of the bigger picture beyond individual performance metrics. Williams nodded slowly, making additional notes on his evaluation sheets. "The mission comes first. Individual performance is meaningless if the team fails. Some of you understand this. Others need to decide whether they're here to serve or here to prove something." As they filed out of the debrief room, Jackson pulled Sarah aside. "That was good work today," he admitted grudgingly. "Rivera's got issues, but your shooting was solid. Your tactical awareness, too." The acknowledgement from a respected peer felt more valuable than any official commendation. That evening, the barracks atmosphere reflected the day's tensions. Candidates naturally gravitated toward those they trusted, and Sarah found herself increasingly isolated as Rivera's influence spread through whispered conversations and carefully planted doubts about her capabilities and motivations. Mills approached her bunk during the brief, free time before lights out. "You handled that situation well today," he said quietly. "Rivera's playing politics instead of focusing on the mission. That's going to catch up with him eventually." His support was understated but genuine, coming from someone whose judgment carried weight among the candidates. Sarah appreciated the gesture, but she understood the larger dynamics at play. Some candidates would always see her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their exclusive brotherhood. Others would judge her solely on performance, allowing her to earn her place through actions rather than acceptance. The key was focusing on the mission rather than the personalities involved. As she cleaned her equipment that night, Sarah reflected on the day's lessons. Urban combat had revealed new aspects of her capabilities while exposing the challenges of operating with hostile teammates. Rivera's sabotage had been obvious enough to backfire, but more subtle forms of resistance would be harder to identify and counter. The photograph of her brother Danny seemed to provide silent encouragement as she prepared for another night's rest. 2 days down, 19 to go. Each day brought new tests, new opportunities to prove herself, and new chances for her detractors to find weaknesses they could exploit. But something fundamental had shifted during the building clearances. Her confidence was no longer based on hope or determination alone, but on demonstrated competence under realistic conditions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she slept with the knowledge that she belonged here not because of anyone's permission, but because she had earned it through performance when it mattered most. Week 2 of selection brought the candidates face-to-face with their deepest fears through psychological evaluations and resistance training. The numbers had already thinned significantly. Only 19 of the original 37 remained. Those who survived this far had proven their basic physical and tactical competence, but the real test was just beginning. Sarah sat in a sterile white room across from Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a former CIA psychologist whose reputation for breaking candidates was legendary throughout the Special Forces community. Morrison's approach was subtle but relentless, probing for weaknesses through seemingly casual conversation that gradually became more invasive and personal. "Tell me about your brother Daniel," Morrison began, consulting a thick file that contained far more information than Sarah had expected. "His death in Afghanistan must have been devastating. Some might say you're here trying to fill a void that can't really be filled. What do you think about that assessment?" Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the direct attack on her motivations. "My brother believed in service above self. I'm here because I want to serve at the highest level possible, not because I'm trying to replace anyone." Her response was measured, but Morrison's knowing smile suggested this was just the opening move in a much longer game. "That's admirable," Morrison continued. "But let's talk about reality. You've faced significant resistance from your fellow candidates. Some might say harassment. Others would call it realistic assessment of your capabilities. How do you distinguish between legitimate concerns and prejudice?" The question was designed to force Sarah into either defending herself as a victim or dismissing legitimate criticisms. Either response would provide Morrison with psychological leverage to exploit. Sarah took a moment to consider her answer carefully. "Every candidate here faces scrutiny," she replied. "My job is to perform at the required level regardless of others' opinions. If there are legitimate concerns about my capabilities, they'll show up in my performance metrics. If there aren't, then the opinions don't matter operationally." Morrison made notes, her pen scratching across the paper with deliberate slowness. Interesting perspective. But what happens when those opinions translate into lack of trust from teammates? When someone refuses to follow your orders because they don't believe in your judgment? How do you handle mission success when the team dynamic is compromised? This was the heart of the psychological evaluation. Morrison wasn't just testing Sarah's mental resilience. She was probing whether Sarah understood the complex interpersonal dynamics that could make or break Special Forces operations. In the field, personal prejudices could get people killed if they weren't properly managed. "Trust is earned through consistent performance over time," Sarah answered. "If someone has legitimate concerns about my judgment, I need to demonstrate better judgment. If their concerns are based on factors unrelated to performance, then that's a leadership issue that has to be addressed for mission success." She paused, then added, "But ultimately, the mission comes first. Personal feelings have to be secondary to operational requirements." The psychological evaluation continued for 2 hours, covering everything from childhood trauma to career aspirations to detailed scenarios about moral decision-making under extreme stress. Morrison's questions became increasingly personal and provocative, testing Sarah's ability to maintain composure while revealing the psychological foundations that would support her under the crushing stress of special operations. That afternoon brought resistance training, euphemistically called advanced interrogation techniques familiarization in the official curriculum. Candidates would experience capture, interrogation, and psychological pressure designed to test their ability to protect classified information while maintaining their sanity under extreme duress. Sarah found herself bound to a metal chair in a cold, dimly lit room, facing Instructor Kowalski, a former military intelligence specialist whose methods pushed right up to the legal boundaries of what could be done to American soldiers during training. The hood over her head had been removed, but the disorientation from hours of sensory deprivation lingered. "Let's start simple, Lieutenant Chun," Kowalski began, using her former Army rank rather than her current candidate status. "We know you have information about operational security protocols from your intelligence background. We know you've seen classified communications procedures. We just need you to verify some details for us." The scenario was carefully constructed to feel realistic while testing specific psychological resilience factors. Sarah's intelligence background made her a particularly valuable test case, as her resistance would need to protect genuinely classified information rather than just training scenarios. "Name, rank, and serial number," Sarah replied, reciting the basic information authorized for release under the Geneva Conventions. Her voice was steady despite the stress position her restraints created and the psychological pressure Kowalski was applying through his questions and demeanor. Kowalski smiled coldly. "Come now, Lieutenant. We're all on the same side here. This isn't about enemy capture. This is about operational security verification. Your cooperation will be noted favorably in your evaluation. Your resistance will raise questions about your ability to work with authorized personnel." The technique was sophisticated, blurring the lines between legitimate authority and unauthorized interrogation. In real-world scenarios, captured soldiers often faced similar psychological manipulation designed to make resistance seem unreasonable or counterproductive. Sarah's challenge was maintaining appropriate security protocols while avoiding unnecessary antagonism. Hours passed in a cycle of questions, stress positions, temperature manipulation, and psychological pressure. Kowalski was joined by other instructors who played different roles: the sympathetic ally, the angry superior, the reasonable negotiator. Each approach was designed to test different aspects of psychological resilience. "Your fellow candidates are talking, you know," offered Instructor Martinez during one rotation. Rivera gave us some interesting insights about team dynamics during urban combat exercises. Jackson shared his concerns about operational security risks. "They're looking out for the mission, being responsible teammates." "What about you?" Sarah's training kicked in as she recognized the isolation technique designed to make her feel abandoned by her peers while suggesting that resistance was futile since others had already cooperated. The implication that respected candidates like Jackson had provided information was particularly insidious because it contained just enough plausibility to create doubt. "Name, rank, and serial number," she repeated, though her voice showed signs of the physical and psychological strain she was experiencing. Her wrists were raw from the restraints, her back ached from the stress position, and the constant psychological pressure was beginning to wear down her mental defenses. The breakthrough moment came near the end of the exercise when Kowalski shifted tactics completely. Instead of continuing the interrogation, he began providing accurate information about Sarah's family, her brother's death, and personal details that could only have come from classified personnel files. "We know about the guilt you carry," he said softly, his voice now gentle rather than harsh. "Daniel died because of intelligence failures, poor communication between units, inadequate operational security. The same problems you're perpetuating right now by refusing to cooperate with legitimate security verification procedures." The emotional manipulation was expertly crafted, connecting Sarah's deepest personal trauma to her current situation while suggesting that her resistance was somehow dishonoring her brother's memory. It was the kind of psychological attack that could break even well-trained soldiers by targeting their core motivations and values. Sarah felt the emotional impact of Kowalski's words, but her training and preparation held. "Name, rank, and serial number," she said again, though her voice cracked slightly with the effort of maintaining composure. When the exercise finally ended, Sarah was physically and emotionally drained. The debrief with Sergeant Major Williams was conducted in a quiet room where she could recover while discussing the lessons learned from the experience. Resistance training isn't just about withstanding interrogation, Williams explained as Sarah slowly regained her equilibrium. It's about understanding your own psychological vulnerabilities and developing strategies to protect critical information while maintaining your sanity under extreme pressure. Sarah nodded, still processing the intensity of what she had experienced. The exercise had revealed aspects of her psychological makeup that she hadn't fully understood, while testing her ability to function under conditions that went far beyond normal military stress. "How did I do, Sergeant Major?" she asked, genuinely uncertain about her performance. The subjective nature of psychological resilience made self-assessment difficult, unlike the clear metrics of physical or tactical exercises. Williams consulted his notes before answering. "You maintained operational security protocols throughout the exercise. Your psychological resilience was solid, and you showed good understanding of appropriate response techniques. The emotional manipulation phase was particularly well handled." The relief Sarah felt was profound, but Williams wasn't finished with his assessment. "However," he continued, "we need to discuss the team dynamics issues that came up during the exercise. Some of your fellow candidates are expressing concerns that could impact operational effectiveness." This was the conversation Sarah had been dreading but expecting. The resistance she faced from candidates like Rivera wasn't just about personal prejudice. It represented a genuine operational challenge that could compromise mission success if left unresolved. "Rivera's complaints are being noted," Williams said carefully, "but so is his performance degradation when working with team members he doesn't personally approve of. Jackson's assessment is more balanced, but he's still questioning whether interpersonal friction will impact mission effectiveness." Sarah listened carefully, understanding that this was more than just feedback. It was intelligence about the political dynamics that could make or break her chances of completing selection successfully. The psychological evaluation and resistance training had tested her individual capabilities, but the real challenge was proving she could function effectively as part of a team despite the hostility from some members. "What's your recommendation, Sergeant Major?" she asked, knowing that Williams' guidance could be crucial for navigating the remaining challenges ahead. Williams studied her for a long moment before responding. "Focus on performance. Let your actions speak louder than anyone else's words. But also start building alliances with candidates who value competence over politics. Mills has been solid. Jackson is coming around. Even some of Rivera's supporters are starting to question his judgment." As Sarah left the debrief and returned to the barracks, she reflected on the day's lessons. The psychological evaluation and resistance training had tested her individual resilience, but the real insights came from understanding how her presence affected team dynamics and mission effectiveness. Week 3 would bring the final phase of selection, extended field exercises where candidates would operate as integrated teams under realistic mission conditions. Physical and technical competence would be assumed. The focus would be on leadership, decision-making, and the ability to maintain performance under sustained pressure. That night, as Sarah prepared her equipment for the field exercises ahead, she thought about Dr. Morrison's questions and Kowalski's psychological attacks. Both had been designed to expose weaknesses, but they had also revealed strengths she hadn't fully recognized in herself. The photograph of Danny seemed to smile at her from its place in her breast pocket. 2 weeks down, 1 to go. The hardest challenges still lay ahead, but she was no longer the uncertain candidate who had started this journey. Whatever came next, she would face it with the knowledge that she had already proven more than many people thought possible. The final week of selection took place in the remote wilderness of the Uhori National Forest, where candidates would face 72 continuous hours of realistic mission scenarios with minimal food, sleep, and support. Only 14 candidates remained from the original 37, and each survivor understood that the slightest mistake could end their journey just steps from the finish line. Sarah crouched behind a fallen log at 0300 hours on the first night, her night vision goggles revealing the thermal signatures of her team as they prepared for their assigned reconnaissance mission. Team composition had been deliberately shuffled for the field exercises, placing her in command of a 4-person unit that included Rivera, Mills, and a new addition named Foster, a former Marine sniper whose quiet competence had earned universal respect. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that she now found herself leading the man who had most vociferously questioned her belonging in the program. Rivera's hostility had evolved into grudging professional acknowledgement over the past 2 weeks, but underlying tensions remained as they faced their most challenging test yet. Target building is 800 meters northeast, Sarah whispered into her radio, studying the intelligence briefing one final time. Two-story structure, unknown number of occupants, possible high-value target on the second floor. Our mission is surveillance and reconnaissance only unless directly engaged. The mission scenario was designed to test decision-making under ambiguous circumstances where candidates had to balance multiple competing priorities while operating with incomplete information. Success required not just tactical competence, but the kind of judgment that separated good soldiers from elite operators. Foster adjusted his sniper rifle and scanned the target area through his scope. I count 3 guards on the perimeter, rotating patrols every 20 minutes. Movement patterns are predictable, but there's a gap in coverage on the southeast corner that lasts approximately 90 seconds. Mills checked his communication equipment and confirmed their exfiltration route was clear. Backup frequencies are programmed. Emergency extraction point alpha is marked, and weather forecast shows clear conditions for the next 6 hours. We're good to go when you give the word. Rivera said nothing, but his body language radiated skepticism about taking orders from someone he still considered unproven. The team dynamic was functional but fragile, held together by professional discipline rather than genuine trust. Sarah understood that her leadership would be tested not just by the mission requirements, but by her team's willingness to follow her judgment when things went wrong. The infiltration proceeded smoothly initially. Sarah's route planning proved effective as the team moved through dense forest without detection, using terrain features and vegetation to mask their approach. Her software engineering background had trained her to think systematically about complex problems, and she applied that analytical thinking to tactical movement and risk assessment. But complications arose when they reached their planned observation position. The intelligence briefing had failed to mention a guard post that blocked their primary overwatch site, forcing Sarah to make real-time adjustments to their plan while maintaining operational security and mission effectiveness. Change of plans, she whispered into her radio. Primary position is compromised. We're moving to alternate position, Charlie, but that puts us closer to patrol routes and reduces our escape options. Everyone acknowledge. Foster's response was immediate and professional. Copy. Moving to position, Charlie. Mills followed with equally crisp acknowledgement. Rivera's response came after a deliberate pause. Roger. Moving to Charlie. His tone conveyed compliance without confidence, a dangerous combination for a team operating in hostile territory. The alternate position provided excellent visibility of the target building, but required the team to remain motionless for extended periods as enemy patrols passed within 50 meters of their location. Sarah found herself calculating risk factors constantly: probability of detection versus intelligence value, mission requirements versus team safety, immediate tactical concerns versus long-term strategic implications. Hour 3 brought the crisis that would define the entire exercise. Foster spotted movement on the target building's second floor that appeared to match the description of their high-value target. But confirmation required additional observation time that would push their extraction window beyond safe parameters. I need 30 more minutes to confirm target identity, Foster reported quietly. Movement patterns and physical characteristics match our briefing, but lighting conditions make positive identification difficult without extended observation. Sarah weighed the decision carefully. Confirming the target's presence would make their mission a complete success, but it would also require staying in position past their planned extraction time, and potentially compromising team safety if patrol schedules changed or additional security forces arrived. Rivera's opinion came through the radio without prompting. We've got enough intelligence for a successful mission report. Staying longer is unnecessary risk for marginal additional value. I recommend immediate extraction. Mills offered a different perspective. Weather conditions are stable, patrol patterns haven't changed, and we haven't seen any indication of increased security alertness. The risk seems manageable for high-value intelligence confirmation. Foster remained focused on his scope, but added his assessment. Target identification is mission-critical. Without positive confirmation, this intelligence has limited operational value. I can make the call in 20 minutes if conditions remain stable. The decision was Sarah's alone, and she understood that her choice would be analyzed and evaluated long after the exercise ended. Conservative decisions prioritize team safety, but might miss critical intelligence opportunities. Aggressive decisions could provide valuable information, but at potentially unacceptable risk to personnel. We stay for confirmation, she decided. Foster, you have 20 minutes maximum. Mills, continue monitoring communications for any indication of increased security activity. Rivera, maintain overwatch on our extraction route, and report any changes in patrol patterns immediately. Rivera's response carried obvious frustration. Roger, maintaining overwatch. His tone suggested disagreement with the decision, but his professionalism prevented him from challenging her authority directly during the mission. The next 20 minutes tested everyone's nerve as they remained motionless in positions that offered concealment, but limited escape options if they were discovered. Sarah found herself questioning her decision repeatedly while monitoring multiple radio frequencies and scanning for any indication that their presence had been detected. Foster's confirmation came with 5 minutes remaining in their extended timeline. Positive identification confirmed. High-value target is present on the second floor, northeast corner room. Multiple additional occupants observed, including what appears to be a planning session with maps and communication equipment. The intelligence windfall validated Sarah's decision to extend their mission, but extraction now became critical as their window for safe movement was rapidly closing. The team moved efficiently through their planned route, but increased patrol activity around the target building suggested their extended presence might have been noticed. Contact rear, Mills whispered urgently as they reached the halfway point of their extraction route. Single guard, moving in our direction, approximately 200 meters out. The situation had shifted from intelligence gathering to potential combat engagement, requiring immediate tactical decisions under extreme pressure. Sarah's mind raced through options as she calculated distances, cover positions, and potential outcomes. Engaging the guard would compromise their mission secrecy and potentially trigger a much larger response. Hiding and hoping to avoid detection carried risks if their concealment was inadequate. Movement to alternate routes might lead them into additional patrols. Everyone freeze and prepare for concealment, she ordered. Foster, can you confirm whether this is routine patrol or active search behavior? The distinction was crucial for determining their next course of action and the level of threat they faced. Foster adjusted his scope to observe the approaching guard. Movement appears routine, no indication of alertness or active searching. He's following a standard patrol route, but it will bring him within 50 meters of our position in approximately 3 minutes. Rivera's voice carried tension. We should have extracted on schedule instead of staying for unnecessary confirmation. Now we're trapped with limited options because of poor decision-making. His criticism was delivered quietly, but with enough venom to indicate his frustration with Sarah's leadership had reached a breaking point. Sarah ignored Rivera's commentary and focused on immediate tactical requirements. Mills, confirm alternate route Delta is clear for immediate movement. Everyone prepare for silent movement on my signal. If we're discovered, Foster takes the guard quietly while the rest of us move to emergency extraction point Bravo. The team executed the movement flawlessly, despite the interpersonal tensions and high-stress environment. Sarah's route planning proved effective as they avoided the patrol and reached their extraction point without detection. The mission was a complete success from an intelligence-gathering perspective, but the team dynamics revealed during the crisis would require careful evaluation. The after-action review took place in a secure briefing room where Sergeant Major Williams and several senior instructors analyzed every aspect of the mission from planning through execution. Video footage from hidden cameras throughout the exercise area provided detailed documentation of each decision point and team interaction. Mission success, Williams began his assessment. Target confirmed, valuable intelligence gathered, team extracted without detection or compromise. From a tactical standpoint, this represents the kind of high-value operation Special Forces units conduct regularly. His tone was professional, but revealed nothing about individual performance evaluations. However, Williams continued, We need to discuss team dynamics and decision-making under pressure. Candidate Chun, explain your decision to extend the mission timeline despite increased risk factors. Sarah had expected this question and had prepared her response carefully. The mission's primary objective was target confirmation, not just surveillance. Without positive identification, the intelligence value was significantly reduced. Weather conditions remained stable, patrol patterns were predictable, and the team had proven capable of maintaining concealment under extended pressure. Williams made notes before continuing. Candidate Rivera, you expressed disagreement with the team leader's decision during the mission. Explain your assessment of the risk-benefit calculation. Rivera's response was measured but firm. Team safety should be the primary consideration when mission objectives can be accomplished through alternative means. The intelligence gathered during our initial observation window was sufficient for a successful mission report. Extended exposure increased risk without proportional benefit. The debate continued for over an hour as instructors probed every aspect of the decision-making process, team communication, and execution under pressure. Other candidates' missions were similarly analyzed, creating a comprehensive evaluation of each person's capabilities and leadership potential. But the most significant moment came when Williams addressed the broader question of team cohesion and operational effectiveness. Special Forces operations require absolute trust between team members. Personal disagreements cannot be allowed to compromise mission success or personnel safety. Some of you have demonstrated the ability to work effectively regardless of personal feelings. Others need to decide whether your individual concerns are more important than unit effectiveness. The implication was clear without being stated directly. Rivera's continued resistance to Sarah's leadership, regardless of her proven competence, represented the kind of personal prejudice that could get people killed in operational environments. His technical skills and physical capabilities were not in question, but his ability to function as part of an integrated team was becoming increasingly problematic. That evening, as candidates prepared for their final evaluation exercises, unexpected news arrived that would change everything. A helicopter landed at the training site carrying a figure whose presence immediately commanded attention from instructors and candidates alike. General Patricia Morrison stepped from the aircraft, her 3-star rank and legendary reputation causing an immediate stir throughout the facility. Morrison was not just any general. She was the architect of modern Special Forces integration policies and one of the most respected operational commanders in the military. Her presence at a routine selection exercise was unprecedented. Candidates, form up for inspection, Williams ordered, his own surprise evident in his tone. The surviving 14 candidates quickly assembled in formation, their exhaustion and stress temporarily forgotten in the face of such unexpected high-level attention. General Morrison moved down the line of candidates, stopping briefly to speak with each one. Her questions were pointed but professional, focused on operational readiness and personal motivations. When she reached Sarah, the general paused longer than with others. Candidate Chun, Morrison said quietly, I've been reviewing your performance evaluations and mission reports. Interesting work, particularly your leadership under pressure during the reconnaissance exercise. The general's tone was neutral, but her attention was clearly focused on Sarah in a way that suggested more than casual interest. Rivera stood at attention nearby, his face carefully controlled, but his eyes reflecting uncertainty about this unexpected development. The general's obvious interest in Sarah's performance contradicted everything he had believed about her presence in the program being the result of political pressure rather than genuine capability. Morrison moved on without additional comment, completing her inspection of the remaining candidates before disappearing into the command building with Sergeant Major Williams and the senior instructor staff. Speculation ran wild among the candidates about the purpose of her visit and its implications for their final evaluations. The answer came the following morning as candidates assembled for what they believed would be their final exercise. Instead, Williams appeared with General Morrison and an announcement that would change everything they thought they understood about their situation. The selection process you have been participating in was not routine Special Forces qualification, Morrison began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembly area. You have been undergoing evaluation for assignment to a classified special mission unit codenamed Recon. This unit requires operators capable of functioning independently in the most challenging environments with minimal support and maximum operational flexibility. The revelation hit the candidates like a physical blow. Ghost Recon was more legend than reality in military circles, whispered about in the same conversations that mentioned Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. If it existed at all, it represented the absolute pinnacle of special operations capability. Morrison continued her briefing as candidates struggled to process the implications. Of the 14 candidates who have made it this far, only a small number will ultimately be selected for Ghost Recon assignment. The evaluation process has been designed to identify not just tactical competence, but the kind of independent thinking and adaptability required for operations where conventional military support is not available. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in before delivering the final surprise. Candidate Chun stepped forward. Sarah moved to the position Morrison indicated, her mind racing as she tried to understand what was happening. Around her, the other candidates watched with expressions ranging from surprise to recognition to barely concealed anger from Rivera. Your performance throughout this selection process has demonstrated exactly the kind of capabilities Ghost Recon requires, Morrison explained. Independent thinking, tactical flexibility, leadership under pressure, and, most importantly, the ability to maintain operational effectiveness despite significant interpersonal challenges. The general's words hung in the air as their full meaning became clear to everyone present. Sarah hadn't been struggling to prove herself worthy of standard Special Forces qualification. She had been demonstrating the exceptional capabilities required for one of the military's most elite and secretive units. Morrison's final words would echo in Sarah's memory for years to come. Welcome to Ghost Recon, Lieutenant Chun. Your real training begins now. As Sarah stood at attention, processing the magnitude of what had just happened, she caught sight of Rivera's face. The man who had spent 3 weeks questioning her right to be there now understood that she hadn't been trying to earn a place in his world. She had been operating in a completely different league entirely. The photograph of her brother Danny seemed to pulse with warmth in her breast pocket as Sarah realized that her journey was just beginning. Everything she had endured, every challenge she had overcome, every moment of doubt and determination had led to this moment when the whispers of "she doesn't belong here" were replaced by the quiet acknowledgement that she had always belonged exactly where she was.